Welcome to Acton in Focus. I'm Vivian Kopsinje Birchall, your host, and my special guests are town employees and who will introduce themselves shortly. But we're at the Heath Hen Meadow, and we'll be talking about the flooding zones, or I don't know whether they call them the flood zones or flooding zones, and they will tell us what the difference is, if there is. But over to Lauren.
Yes, thank you, Vivian. Hi, my name's Lauren West. I'm an environmental analyst in the sustainability office for the town. I'm joined today with Yutao Wang from the engineering department
Hi, I'm Yutao.
and Ian Bergerman from the conservation division.
Hello, everybody.
And as Vivian said, today we're going to go around town and show a couple areas that are more prone to flooding during major weather events. We're going to talk about what the town has been doing for addressing flooding, some things that residents can do at home to prevent damage from flooding to happen to their homes and their streets. And we're going to talk a little bit about the AB STEAM hackathon that's coming up, where students will be tasked with figuring out new creative solutions to addressing some of the flooding that's happening here.
Maybe to kick us off, can you describe where we are right now? I know I said it's the Heath Hen Meadow, but where is it located in Acton?
Yes, I'll pass it off to Ian, who manages our conservation lands.
All right.
Do we want to stand here more? Or do we want to walk up a little bit?
Up to you. You're the
Let's walk
boss.
up, yeah.
All right. Come with us. And we're with Ian Bergman from the Conservation Department. So Ian, take us through where we are right now and how it relates to the flooding.
Absolutely. So we are right now located at Heath Hen Meadow Conservation Land, which has access off of Central Street and also Robin Street. So this specific bridge we're standing on right now actually is a really great connection for people to walk over to getting to West Acton from areas like Jones Field. But this specific area we're in is also an area that we've been experiencing a lot of flooding. The flooding that we have here is primarily been caused by our beaver friends, who are doing a really fantastic job at maintaining our wetland system, especially during our drier periods of time. So as you can tell just by looking around, there are multiple different species here who are benefiting from the work of the beavers, including anything from our catbirds all the way down to our red maples, which this time of year are just starting to change to their beautiful red crimson color, which you can see all around the wetland. But that said, when flooding does occur in these areas, unlike trees and birds, us people get wet feet. So what we have to do here is look at how can we manage to have trail access and also allow for the wildlife habitat to continue to exist. So what you'll see at Heath Hen Meadow is there is a very large beaver dam that's been built here. This has been being created for a couple of years now. Certainly the old infrastructure here from our bridges that used to be here are now underwater. So this new bridge actually is a little bit more accessible. Sometimes on a clear day you can look into the water and see the foundation of the old bridge. So what we have to do here is be able to figure out a way to allow for our trails to continue to be accessible. Recently, as of last year and this year, we were having a lot of our trails in this specific area becoming inaccessible. Some of our boardwalks, in fact, floated away. So it is a serious problem that we've been dealing with here. Luckily, though, with the temperatures and the drought, we've actually been seeing a little bit of that flooding subside. At the same time, we are working with some professionals to come up with solutions to this. And some of those look like what are sometimes called a pond leveler device. We do have one in here that is no longer functional. It's a little tube you can see right over here where water is supposed to flow through using gravity that goes right through their beaver dam undetected. Right now, it's just such a amateur version that we installed years and years and years ago that's no longer up to the standard that we need. So we are bringing in professionals here that are going to help us pipe a new pipe through this area that will allow it to drain in the high spot and drain to the low spot so the water can continue to flow, and it will bring this water level down. And what that does for the beavers is it thinks that they have a leak in their dam, so they'll continue to build their dam up without being unaware that there's a pipe slowly draining the water. And we do it in a sustainable way where we can still have enough water level in here to support the biodiversity, but we can also prevent our trails at the either side of this bridge from flooding. So very often you'll come down this trail and you'll see the bridges here doing great, but getting to the bridge is a real problem. So we are still working in different ways on how to figure out a long-term solution to that. And I think part of that is going to be both having these beaver pipes put in and potentially working with our lovely Boy Scouts and Eagle Scout projects in town to have them maybe build some more ramps to get to this bridge. That way, if we do experience some seasonal flooding, it's okay and people can still access the area.
Yeah, you've covered a little bit of a question I wanted to kind of follow up with that. You know, one might say that the flooding is happening in a conservation area and so it doesn't really affect Acton. But what are some of the ways that this flooding actually impacts other parts of the town? And you've briefly mentioned that it affects some of the trails. So if you could add to that just a little bit so we can
Yeah.
understand the intensity of this.
Absolutely. So again, you're absolutely right. Our conservation lands, they are areas dedicated for ecosystem functions. So flood absorption is definitely one of their roles. However, at the same time, like you're saying, when it can be too flooded, especially from a beaver dam, unfortunately, one of the things that homeowners can see having an impact is septic tanks. Those septic systems are usually located sometimes near wet areas. And if the groundwater table gets a little bit too high, it could really have a negative, almost public health impact on their septic systems. So often when we're working with our solutions, we're looking at, okay, is the beaver having an impact on septic systems? Is the beaver having an impact on trails? Or is the beaver just expanding the wetland and nobody's being disturbed by it? So we always want to calculate our moves to understand how can we make the best benefit for everybody at all times, which is difficult because water is very dynamic.
Right, it is. And actually, it makes me also think about another follow-up question. Lauren earlier talked about the hackathon. So
Yep.
as we're trying to come up with solutions for this flooding, what are you hoping for as, you know, in terms of solutions? What would those solutions result into?
Yeah.
If successful, or when successful.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, given the crowd that we got joining us for our solutions, they certainly are innovative. These aren't people with college degrees, so they're going to have a lot more creativity at this time. And I think they're going to have a lot more optimism about their solutions. Part of it we're hoping is, you know, solutions could range anywhere from sort of a hard engineering perspective, where they are looking at a beaver dam and saying, you know, how can water traverse through the dam without the beavers knowing about it, without the beavers getting aggressive about it and wanting to really build back up the dam or jam up any of their systems they create. At the same time, given that this is an AB STEAM project, we always want to emphasize that the A in there stands for art. And so we also want to say that there are really creative approaches that might be just educating people about the benefits of beavers. If more people can maybe see, you know, beavers actually are one of the keys to fighting climate change because they create habitat for the water to go somewhere and be stored.
Yeah.
We are still right now in a drought actually declared
Oh, wow.
in the state, but you can see we all know where the water's hiding. And it's thanks to these wonderful beavers. And if you came here just a little bit earlier in the summer, full of frogs, bullfrogs, snakes, birds, this entire area is such a rich area of biodiversity that we really want to make sure they exist. But at the same time, we have to recognize that there are human needs, protecting our septic system, access to our roads, access to our trails, and especially that this is such a great area where you could access from Robin Street, you can go to Central Street, and all of a sudden you're in West Acton.
Right.
And so again, this creates a really cool connection for people where they can go through the woods to go to businesses or go to economic centers.
Well, you mentioned natural habitat, but you mentioned snakes, which is my cue to leave because I'm afraid of snakes. So where are we going to next?
Yeah, I believe next we'll be heading out with our civil engineer who will be bringing us to, I believe we'll be at Hayward and Charter. So stay tuned.
So we just came back from Heath Hen Meadow and we are at Charter Street with Utah from the engineering department. And Utah, please tell us where we are, what we're doing, and how it's connected to the flooding in Acton.
Yeah, so we're at 62 Charter Road here, and what we have here is a really simplified system. Over here is a grate. You'll see these in the road. We call them catch basins. And connected to this one catch basin is an 8-inch pipe that leads all the way out across the street towards an outfall. And what this structure does is it takes water off the side of the road, it comes in all in here, and then it flows out towards the outfall. About 2, maybe 3 years ago, we had an issue with flooding right where we're standing, where the pipe was blocked and water would stay, and it would just slowly rise up until it got all over the road. And it was in the winter too, so it'd freeze over. So
Ooh.
big issues.
And then what are some of the causes of that flooding that happened?
Yeah. So we typically see it during areas of high rainfall.
Okay.
And oftentimes, if this grate is covered with leaves, grass clippings, or pine needles, like you see right now, it can be tough
I'm doing
For
my due diligence for the community.
doing your part. It can be tough for water to get in and flow through.
Okay. And what can the community do to kind of contribute or be a part of stakeholders in making sure we don't get flooding?
Yeah. So we have about 4,000 of these in town, 4,000 of these structures. We have a crew of about 20 guys that go out every time before it rains to try and clear off the top. But if you see one that's just not cleared, go ahead and just take a shovel and push all the leaves and stuff off to the side. And if you see areas where water's coming out of the catch basin, if you wouldn't mind just sending us an email at highway@actonma.gov, give us a quick report. We'll be out here to try and figure out what's wrong.
Is there anything we haven't talked about that you'd like our viewers to know?
No, this is just a really simple system. So
Okay.
it's one drain, one outfall. Yeah.
One drain, one output.
Yes.
Got that. Our next stop after Utah's demonstration of the drainage systems is the Arboretum. So please come with us. So we're back with the gang of three from the town of Acton at our final stop at one of my favorite places in town, the Acton Arboretum. So I'm going to hand it over to Lauren. Tell us why we're here and how it ties into the whole flooding zone.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So we're mainly here to talk about this rain garden that's behind us as an example of something residents can do at their homes. We saw a lot of different scenarios for flooding today, some about wildlife interference, some about stormwater systems. Our hazard mitigation plan that was recently updated by the town identified flooding as kind of the main natural disaster risk to the town. In eastern Massachusetts, flooding can be very common. And so there's a couple of things in town that we're doing to try to reduce the threat of floods. The hazard mitigation plan was one example of a planning effort that the town did to do lots of outreach around what's happening with flooding in town and how we can increase our stormwater systems. And one way to do that is to increase the amount of stormwater that we can retain in the ground to recharge our local water systems. So a rain garden like this is home to a bunch of native plants that do a lot of work to absorb rainwater, to filter it, to redirect the flow so it's not going into the street. And you can see here, definitely take a walk over here if you haven't already. It's a beautiful spot. Another area in town that was addressed in the hazard mitigation plan is 53 River Street. That was a project where the town got some state grant funding and they took down an old dam that was unsafe and it's been remediated and they're turning it into a public park. That was just another hazard that had been identified. Another thing folks can do is reduce the amount of impervious pavement that they have at home. Things like asphalt that don't allow water to trickle into the ground can cause a flooding risk because the water will quickly be swept into the street or in other areas. Whereas when you have permeable pavement, like some of these pavers here at the Arboretum, it allows the water to kind of trickle into the ground.
Yeah, a very, very quick question regarding, first of all, if flooding has been identified as one of the risk natural hazards in the town. But flooding in, say, a coastal area will be different from flooding in the town of Acton. What are some of those differences so that, we as the community members don't minimize the threat of flooding?
Yeah, I think people do often kind of associate flooding as more of a coastal issue, but it's definitely still an issue in a town like Acton that isn't connected to the ocean. I think they do a lot of work with rain gardens and trying to make sure that there's a lot of retention right near the coast because they kind of expect where the water would come in from. Those businesses and homes that are along the coastline are vulnerable. Here, it's kind of harder to tell sometimes exactly where it would be hit most. We do have a map from FEMA that shows kind of the flood-prone areas, the floodplain. But we saw with the recent floods in Leominster that an area like this could definitely be hit, especially with infrastructure. Like during the microburst, I think a lot of people kind of noticed what can happen when there's a really quick storm that comes through. A lot of trees were down, and just like access to a lot of places was shut down for a couple days there.
Do you want to add anything to?
Yeah.
I think in addition, when you're mentioning coastal areas, and we also look at areas like this that are not near the coast, our natural processes are a little bit different. So in our coastal areas, we have something called marsh migration, where a marsh is going to naturally climb up on the landscape as sea level rises naturally. We are at a time where sea level is rising faster than it has before, much faster than these natural ecosystems adapt to. And so, just like Lauren mentioned, in areas where we don't have a coastal area, we know that Massachusetts and New England had a rich history of lots of beavers. Those beavers were nearly hunted to extinction, and they've completely transformed our landscape without them. And therefore, we are building and have built in areas that were predominantly really wet, and they were areas for flood storage. So often, what we run into today is having to explain to somebody, your house is built in an area that is supposed to flood because beavers were creating habitat for a wetland to exist there, and we hadn't had laws in place yet where we were protecting those specific habitats. Similarly, on our coastal areas, you see areas in the southeast United States where houses are collapsing and falling into the ocean. Those houses should have never been built there because that specific habitat is supposed to change. And so what we're just seeing today is a rapid change in our environment that nobody is quite prepared for. But that's why today, what we're doing is one step closer to educating each other to being prepared.
And then maybe one question for Utah regarding the drainage systems.
Yes.
So we have heard, that flooding does exist in our community. Maybe for us to appreciate the scope, how often do you get calls from your residents about challenges with flooding, and what is some of the trends you've seen? Are there certain parts of the town where you get those many calls, and if so, what is the best way for the community to participate and engage in making sure we reduce flooding?
Yeah, so we get calls every time it rains. Every time it rains, we get at least one or two calls about some of our aging stormwater systems. The issue is that our system was built in the 70s, and it does very much function like a whole ecosystem. If we just adjust one pipe, it'll create flooding issues in another area. We see this pretty much all over town where the pipes just aren't big enough, our structures just aren't large enough. And a great way for folks to participate is just to one, let us know where you're seeing flooding, and two, reach out to the Water Resources Advisory Committee, which they're doing good work on trying to come up with a report to help us fund some of our improvements that we want to do around town.
Absolutely. Is there anything that we have left out, guys, before we wrap this up?
Yeah, I think one thing that we can circle back to is the hackathon that's happening. It'll be beginning next month in October, and that is going to be put on by AB STEAM through a grant that we received from the Integral Charitable Foundation. It's an environmental consulting group that is going to lead these groups of students in addressing some of the flooding that we heard about today with beavers in town, with our stormwater systems. So there's still time for people to sign up, but there'll also be final presentations where we can see what the students come up with there.
I'm excited to see what comes out of that.
Yeah.
And with that, thank you so much for taking us through the flooding zones and causes and all that. And thank you for everything that you do for the town of Acton.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course, anytime. It's always fun. And to our viewers, I hope you've learned about flooding zones in Acton. Let's all do our part to make sure that we reduce flooding in the town of Acton. But for now, thank you for watching. Till next time.